Hello and welcome back to the Premier Injuries channel. Today we are talking all about Ben's team reveal. You've kind of flirted with us. You've kind of talked us through some of the options through the most recent stream. So if people want to check that out, you've got some insights there. But yeah, let's talk us through, starting with your back line, Ben.
I'd like to kick this stream off on my draft by saying, look, I play the game slightly different to most other people. I play it in a way that I enjoy. I'm not going for overall rank. I'm not going for top 10K finishes. I'm just going with intuition. I'm going for some punty decisions. I'm going for some rogue captain decisions. I tend to try and stick to low ownership players. And first, ultimately, I'm going to enjoy myself. So, do you know what? If it backfires, then so what? I'm not too disappointed. And I'm just playing for the enjoyment of the game, nothing more. If success, and you'll probably, see by my team, if success does come along the way, and it will be a huge if, then great. But like I say, if it doesn't, and I steadily tick along with the occasional good game week, then I'm more than happy to do. So that'll please me.
Well, let's start then analysing this team. I do have question marks over your goalkeeper, but yeah, you introduce who your team is. Talking us through that back line first and foremost.
I had question marks over me own goalkeeper, Jason, there. So I almost defaulted to Dubravka and Pope. I can't quite nail down in my own mind who's going to start. Dubravka's done nothing wrong. I think he's going to be a little bit unfortunate. I think I'll be a little bit harsh on the goalkeeper. But Nick Pope does start. However, there's enough doubt in my own mind to move away from that, particularly when I also include Kieran Trippier in that backline. So, Kieran Trippier doesn't really need me to sell what he brings to the game in terms of his dead ball, creativity, and also defensively, certainly under Eddie Howe, he's brought that solidity to that back line. Now, I'm hoping that Newcastle are going to ride on this, continue to ride on this wave of enthusiasm and confidence and energy from the crowd and buzz around the city and have a really good start to the campaign. That will come by keeping key players fit, Kieran Trippier being one of those. So, look, Kieran Trippier is in, but the likes of Nick Pope and Dubravka are out now. David Raya is a keeper who I don't know if he's going to start or not, but he's in there with Brentford. I'm probably going to say backup for the moment. I've discussed on other streams slight concerns around Brentford. I'm just not totally convinced how they're going to cope with the loss of Christian Eriksen. I do think his impact and what he brought to that team during that latter part when they finished the season so well, so strongly, I think that will be felt. And I think, what we don't want to see is, or what I don't want to see is that Brentford team that we had in that middle section of the season. I think you earmarked it, Jason, that sort of 15, 20 game period where did they return 12 points and they were poor. They weren't great, and they did flirt, or certainly discussion around, would they be pulled into that relegation sort of dogfight. As it transpired, it didn't, but that, for the most part, contributed or came about as players were returning from injury and Christian Eriksen. So we've got David Raya in there. First choice probably going into week one is David De Gea.
Yeah, this one has massive question marks for me, but let's hear your rationale first, and then I'll pop the questions to you.
Look, I think that under Ten Hag, United are going to go through that little bit of a transitional phase. He wants to imprint and he wants to implement new philosophies, new strategies on the team. And, ultimately, I think as a long term, that they will be successful. They've got a lot of catching up to do. They've got rid of some of the dead wood. They've got rid of some of the personality Pogba in that changing room, who can only be a good thing. I'm looking at elsewhere in the team who I could potentially have brought in. There's been talks about the Martials, the Sanchos, maybe even the Brunos. But I don't want to get caught up too much in the hype of pre-season. They've looked okay. I'll wait and see the cut and thrust of the Premier League first. So the David De Gea was just my way of having some kind of involvement from Manchester United and keep them in. And I think defensively, that they may do okay. I'm not looking at fixture difficulties. I'm not even considering any of that for this moment in time. For the first 2, 3, 4 game weeks, for me, it's absolutely irrelevant. Others will disagree, and I know this is me. We're going to have players bedding in. We're going to have new philosophies, new formations, teams coming up. There's going to be surprises. So look, for me, it's a little bit of a lottery, and it's an opportunity, and I still think we're going to see a lot of surprise results. So that's why I've went with David De Gea. Now, in defence, and I don't know how I'm going to set this team up yet, but I'll just go through those individually. Again, similar to Manchester United, I'm looking at Liverpool, and I've got to have involvement with Liverpool. They're outstanding team, undoubtedly up there with some of the best teams in the world, not just the Premier League in Europe. Trent, for me, is a standout player, is the go-to. I've looked at his ownership. Was it 58%? I think we've discussed. I'm not even entertaining any of that, to be honest. Far too high, far too template. I did then consider Robbo, but it was Van Dijk who got the nod. Comes in at 0.5 less, but he's also a player that I see as maybe being more rotation-proof, as it were, in that Jurgen Klopp team. He's the player that I would see maybe as a mainstay of that defence. Yes, you've got Joel Matip and you've got Konate. I see those two maybe being rotated in and around Van Dijk initially, whereas on the flanks, you've got Robbo and you've got Trent. And we did see on occasions, and even more so this season, don't forget we have 4 additional Premier League games shoehorned in before that World Cup break, and then also a couple of Champions League qualifying games. So there's initial 6 games in there. So that could mean, we've seen the likes of James Milner, we've seen Curtis Jones, all come into those fullback areas. And for me, there may be occasions where we do see Trent or Robbo drop to the bench. And of course, ownership for Van Dijk around 13%. That is probably on the upper limit to where I like to go. But look, I'm happy with that. I'm happy with him being a differential in that Liverpool backline. So that's why I went with Van Dijk. I have went double City. And again, I'm just going with players that I like. I'm not following anybody else's drafts. I'm not even following anybody else's pods or it's just basically what I think. Cancelo, I think he's the obvious shout. He offers so much just in terms of what he can bring going forward. And he has the added bonus that, with that City defence, he's got one of the strongest in the league. So there's always going to be some big clean sheet opportunities in there. And I've paired him with Diaz. I'll wait and see on that one. Diaz, again, he's probably a player that's going to be that nailed down in that start 11, particularly with Aymeric Laporte. Sideline currently with that MCL problem. So it'll be maybe Nathan Ake and John Stones who works around him. He's in there for now, primarily for his, what he can offer in terms of his clean sheets. Very little else, the occasional goal. And finally, I like what Antonio Conte is doing at Tottenham. Ideally, I'd want to go on the flanks. I'd probably be looking at maybe a Perisic or maybe a Doherty. But we've had this discussion many times before. I'm just not convinced who Conte is going to go with in the league and who he's going to go with in that cup competition. I don't think there's a great deal between all 4 of those players who are vying for positions there, and that makes me a little bit wary. I went with Eric Dyer last season as a bit of a punt. He offered great value, and for that reason alone, you know what? I'm keeping the faith, and I've plumbed for Eric Dyer once again.
Well, let's go
It's
through
yours.
then. Yeah, let's go through these decisions there. Well, one of the first questions I was going to ask was purely from maybe saving money to put elsewhere. I don't know how much you have spent, but if you're set on De Gea, who will be starting every week, because you said you're not too sure about Raya, why don't you save the 0.5, put the purchase Heaton? He's a 4.0 keeper. He'll be back up to De Gea if he never plays. And then you could put 0.5 somewhere else in your team, because realistically, you're not going to rotate your goalkeepers. There's too much heartache in that. Why not remove that heartache? Just have De Gea, Heaton, and then you can put your money in somebody else, into another outrageous differential pick.
You actually make a very good point there, Jason. And that's the mindset sometimes that I struggle to get into. The nuances of maybe playing this game. Sometimes I do occasionally rotate keepers around fixtures. So maybe the thinking was, well, one, United are still really untested under Erik ten Hag. They've looked promising pre-season. And maybe it takes a game week or 2 or 3 or 4 before they get up to speed. They're implementing his philosophies and they're playing a style of football that he wants them to play. So I think there's certainly that comes into the thinking. And while I've got David De Gea and Raya, I can see that, and I can maybe switch around the fixture. So I'm not adverse to certainly dropping De Gea as a £5 million goalkeeper, not by any stretch of the imagination. And again, I still have reservations around maybe Brentford, but I do see that 1 point, that 0.5 being I can spend it elsewhere. But also I like the flexibility of also, well, are we still within that COVID environment? Are late postponements still a possibility? Anything is, you cannot rule anything out these days. And, if Manchester United were to have a late postponement and I was to lose a goalkeeper, or both goalkeepers in instance, then I do have an option as a fallback. And maybe it's just that flexibility that I'm happier with, and having the comfort and the knowledge that, I haven't got all me, I'm not tied to one particular team in a position.
I was going to ask a question as well with Manchester City, maybe a differential pick that you might like, maybe even more than Diaz. Kyle Walker, realistically, he's 5.0. Is he going to be starting every game this season? Because Zinchenko is not there anymore as backup. Looking at the back line of Manchester City, you've got Cancelo, you've got Diaz, Walker, Stones, Ake. Looking at that, I mean, could he be a cheaper but more attacking player than Diaz?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking from the perspective that if Pep is going to rotate, and we know he loves to rotate, I almost see Diaz as being not rotation proof, because nobody really ever is in that City team. Maybe De Bruyne and Edison, possibly. Diaz is going to get minutes. With Walker, look, he can change up his formation. He could go with a back three. He can drop other players in there. And yeah, look, I know that Zinchenko's gone. He can still put Cancelo in there as well if he wanted. He could go with a 3 with Stones, Ake, and Diaz. So there are lots of options, and so that would be my only concern. And I hate starting players, putting them in my predicted lineup only for the managers to drop them in, and that's my worry. Always my worry with City. So I've tried my best to nail down those players who I expect will get the most minutes over the period of a season.
Yeah, it was just a question talking point. And as well, realistically with the kind of style that Pep plays, just because Walker is a wing back doesn't mean that he'll probably play, because when they transition into attack with the kind of 2-3-5 formation, those wing backs kind of go into the midfield. So maybe somebody with stronger ball playing abilities than Walker might be preferred. So maybe Stones could start as like a right back and then move up into that midfield position. But I like the back line, and I've got Trippier myself. I think he's really being overlooked from the fact that he's so brilliant on dead balls. But also Eddie Howe is a marginal gains manager. He likes set piece work. Trippier's going to be taking them. He's going to be delivering them to a Newcastle team with some fairly good aerial threat. So I like that a lot. I like the Van Dijk pick purely from somebody who enjoys set pieces. He's a specialist to get onto them. And Dyer as well. So I've talked about this quite a few times on our streams. I've talked about this with Chris Miller from the Extra Inch podcast, but I'll talk about it on here as well in case people haven't seen it. Tottenham have signed up a new set piece specialist, Gianni Vio, who worked with the Italian national team. Now, this benefits Dyer massively because Son will be delivering those opportunities. Again, this is why I like Son over Kane as the pick over the season. He'll be taking the dead balls, but Dyer is one of the focal points of these dead ball situations. He could be heading in lots of goals. Tottenham were poor at set pieces last season. Usually teams score about 20% of their goals from dead ball situations. If they can get up to a normal kind of level of output, Dyer could be one of the main beneficiaries. And even if he isn't, he's going to get a lot of clean sheets. Conte teams are always strong at the back, and we've seen that last season. So I like your differential picks. And I'm just shocked with you having the high ownership Cancelo, but we'll see if you keep to him there. Let's move to the midfield though, because this is where there's some real differential, outrageous picks. You're smiling there. You love it. You love the differential picks, and I love it as well. I mean, talk us through your thinking, your reasoning, and the players in there.
Yeah, as you'll see, there isn't a great deal of outlay into some of these midfield players. Look, I'm going to go with James Ward-Prowse. He's not a player who's going to light up the world of FPL with a series of double-digit performances. He will just steadily chip away. We know what he can deliver from a dead ball. He's on penalties. His free kicks are almost like a penalty. And while I'm not really too keen on Southampton generally, he offers that spark. He's their big hope. I've been with him now for more or less 2 years, the last 2 seasons. So James Ward-Prowse has got to be in there for me. And like I say, he's a steady performer. He's consistent. So that's why he's in it. 6.5 million. I'm happy to spend that kind of money elsewhere. There's a punt here, and the more I'm even thinking about this punt, the more I'm actually warming towards it. But it's a punt, and it's Dele Alli. And this comes off the back of the injury to Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Now, we still don't know the full extent of that problem. But of course, in the absence of what we think is certainly for game week 1, and the absence of Richarlison, who has since moved on, then possibility that Dele Alli could have more of an attacking role within that team. Now, we know the Toffees do have Solomon Rondon, but I see his role, to be coming more from the bench. You have the likes of Gordon and Dwight McNeil, who can give width, that wing play. And that maybe we have seen in the past. Dele Alli plays centrally in that advanced role. And if we can see anything like the Dele Alli of old, of a few years back, at 5.5 million, I certainly think he's a punt. The worry is that, Everton aren't great. And like I said, the absence of Dominic Calvert-Lewin will certainly be felt. But at 5.5, look, he's an enabler. He enables me to invest money elsewhere. In midfield, I'm going to... The lineup that you'll see will be a James Ward-Prowse teammate, and I have to hold my hands up and say I don't really have any real sort of knowledge or insight into how actually good he is, and we're not really one for buying into players on pre-season form and so on and so forth. But Aribo at 5.5 million, just on the back of that one goal, and having two back-to-back seasons in the Scottish Premier with Rangers of double-digit attack and returns, I thought he was worth a punt. Looking at the forums, reading people's remarks, he's a player that they hold in very high regard. They feel that he can transition to the Premier League. The only concern here is he's not going to be a starter in my team, or certainly a regular starter. He'll be on the bench, and he'll be one of those players, if he does start and he does score and he is getting the points, it'll drive us crazy if he's not part of my team. And a large portion of those points that he potentially could attract, I wouldn't see any benefit from that. So there's almost a part of me that maybe wants to mitigate any of that heartache. And I may look to potentially swap that up with another player, same price point, 5.5, Christian Norgard. I'd feel a lot happier starting Christian Norgard in that Brentford team based on Thomas Frank's remarks last weekend after Betis returned after injury, changed the game, elevate Brentford to a different level. Now that Brian Mbeumo's been reclassified as an attacker, based on last season's points, Norgard was the highest point scorer without Brian Mbeumo. So yeah, we know he can play ball, and you've touched upon it before. If Brentford adopt that 4-3-3 and he plays in that advanced role, maybe in that space which has been now left by Christian Eriksen, then we could have a real player on our hands. Again, the only issue that I have here is how much that loss of Eriksen will be felt. Next, I've took again another bit of a punt. I think all my midfield are a bit of a punt, but I've went with Rodrigo from Leeds. He's a player who sort of just March really sort of went above and beyond to try and keep him a part of that team, put his arm around him, made him, persisted with him, showed that he had belief. And he has impressed during pre-season. I certainly expect Leeds to kick on from last year. I'm expecting improved performances. Again, we're talking about a side who is potentially in transition. The loss of Calvert-Phillips, they're still without the likes of Luke Ayling. But we will be seeing Patrick Bamford back in that team, and Rodrigo maybe as part of that attack. He has scored goals. So he's a player, again, that comes in at a price point around 6 million. It opens up doors for other players within that team. And then finally, I can't believe it, but I've put Trossard in the in that Brighton team, and Graham Potter sides and Brighton generally haven't favoured many of those players in recent years. How frustrating. Everybody talks about Brighton, how pretty they are in the eye, how they're great underlying stats, and we're expecting them to bang. I just don't see it. And, there's a point where you go, there's only so long that you can fail to live up to that potential before you then say, well, actually, you're just not as good as those numbers suggest or as people imply. So I'm going on the premise that we've had two subpar seasons in the grand scheme of things, based on potential, based on the fact that Brighton may bang this year. That's what I'm maybe hoping and praying. And if that's the case, then Trossard should be thereabouts. He's always going to be, playing in those attacking roles and as a midfielder. Again, 6.5 million. might be on a little bit on the high side for what he is, but I'm prepared to take that gamble early doors.
Well, let's go through these picks then really quickly. I like the Ward-Prowse pick because, as you said there, set pieces, he's not really affected. And I mean, he's 6.5, which is a bit expensive for me just for the set pieces. But again, you like your differentials, and he's somebody you've trusted in, that you've had good seasons with. Again, I like the Trossard pick purely because I've looked into Undav as the new potential striker for Brighton. So last season, Brighton had a massive underperformance in terms of XG. They could have probably been a European team if they just scored their goals. So just kind of looking at that data, they had the 9th best XG, so 54 goals they should have scored, when they actually scored 42 goals. So they were 15th. So about 12 goals underperformance there, really kind of appalling. Whereas Neil Mapai, he regularly underperforms. In fact, almost every team in the, every player in the Brighton team have a negative XG delta. That means that they don't meet their XG. Whereas Undav comes in and he has met his XG. He's overperformed it last year. But the problem always is they're coming from abroad, they're coming from a lower league. He has a 42% shot accuracy. That would mean that he's a top 26 percentile in the leagues. Hopefully that's not affected too much. And if he's getting on to the end of the high quality opportunities that Brighton are creating, which Trossard will be laying on, then hopefully they can meet that output. And like you said, Trossard is really involved with the goals, with setting it up. He's like the main beneficiary of somebody like Undav coming in. So there's a bit of method in that madness as well. The Dele Alli pick, differential, I can see where it's coming from, but I just avoid Everton because they're so appalling. But the Rodrigo one, I mean, I really don't like that one, just purely because surely he's a rotation risk with Bamford coming back to full fitness. And then also he's not that good, is he? Like, looking at his shots, he had plenty of opportunity last season with Bamford out of the team. And then when you look at it, he's kind of 7 XG for the season. He only managed 25 shots in the box. Obviously, Leeds had a really poor season where they had, so many injuries. But the fact that he's only got like a 12.8% goal conversion rate shows that he's not very good when he gets the ball near the box, when he's got those opportunities. That's the only one that I would recommend changing. But again, you like to play your differentialness. And then the Aribo pick could be inspired. I mean, who was the other one that you were kind of vying for?
Christian Norgard.
That was it, Christian Norgard. I mean, I'd probably play Norgard over Aribo, purely because more nailed, whatever. And maybe a slightly better attack of Brentford. But yeah, the Rodrigo one's the only one. I hope that's not too insulting.
I mean, the Rodrigo one, look, I know what you're saying. I'm just thinking, Jess March, he's a big admirer. The Bamford changes the dynamics of the team. It changes the pressures on Rodrigo. You've now got rid of Rafinha, so there's maybe a slightly different role in that team. And like I say, the limelight isn't on him to deliver and get those goals. That will default back to Bamford. And I think, there's a reason why they did spend, a significant piece of money on it. We haven't seen it yet. And I'm hoping, after that first season, like I say, we see a different Leeds team and we also see a different Rodrigo. But look, I take on board everything that you say there, because it's, they're totally, what can you say? I can't really dispute them, but it's a punt, and I'm happy to take that punt.
The positive to Rodrigo is he's not a striker. He's more of like a creative striker. So maybe with Bamford in the team, that might bolster his point output, because his XA per 90, top 19%, key passes per 90, top 14%, passes into the final third, top 2%, and passes into the penalty area, top 14%. These are pretty good numbers creative-wise. But it's, again, you and I have talked about how we don't like Bamford because he just about matches XG, but he seems to need 100 shots to kind of get one goal. Even if Rodrigo's, supplying loads and loads, will he do that? But let's move it then on to the final bit, maybe the most fun bit, the front three. You've gone, fairly big at the front.
Always go big at the front. Look, Callum Wilson. Is everybody sleeping on Callum Wilson? 3.1% ownership.
No.
What's good? 7.5 million.
We're touting this one. This is like one of our differential picks of the season. It's ridiculous, isn't it?
Look, yeah. Sure, there's concerns with regards to his fitness and whether he can stay, available for Eddie Howe. But, all of the noises, all of the pre-season, everything suggests that, we could be in for a massive season from him. His minutes per goal ratio is fantastic. He came back off that long-term injury at the end of last season. He still ended up top goal scorer for Newcastle. Now, yeah, you may look at that and think that's no great shakes, but, the guy knows where the back of the net is. He's on penalties, and I think that's criminally under-owned. Like I say, it's 3.1%. So he was straight in. And look, if he does pick up an injury, you get rid. You look elsewhere. Sitting alongside him, I have went Harry Kane. I jumped on Harry Kane early last year when he had very low ownership. I think he was under 10%. And he's consistent. It doesn't really matter, over the course of the season, if you keep faith with Harry Kane, he's getting you goals and he's getting you assists. So, and what Antonio Conte promises big things. He's looking fast, he's looking sharp. He's probably a few pounds lighter than he was going into last season. So he's going to be at optimal levels. The only concern may be once we get to around maybe October, November time, those players looking forward to the World Cup. Is there a slight change in mindset, in philosophies, and how they approach games and how they manage games? That's something to be aware of. But during these early game weeks, I'm really expecting Tottenham to start well. And Harry Kane, like I say, will be at the forefront of those of anything that they do in terms of attacking play. And the third and final choice, and again, ownership. I've never even looked at his ownership. I'm going to do that now, I suggest. So that's very, very high.
You're going to get a heart attack there.
I tied 47%. But like I say, it's not always just about avoiding the template. It's going about the players who I like and who I admire and who excite me. And Haaland is somebody who could really just come in and set this Premier League alight. He's an absolute fantastic specimen, a beast of a guy. He's almost this evolution of what players now are transcending into becoming physically strong in every aspect. Every element of his game lends itself to being a success in the Premier League. Question marks again with regards to his fitness and one or two injuries that he has picked up in recent times. But look, I'm not overly concerned about that. I'm just selecting a player purely based on the fact that I absolutely love him and he's outstanding. And I had to have him in my team. So that is definitely a heart overhead moment. And like I say, everything that we discuss about players coming in and settling, that goes out the window. And this isn't for me. Do what I say, not what I do.
I mean, So with the Wilson pick, I love it myself. I've got him in my team. Like you said, penalties, he's on them. High quality team around him. Newcastle, little incremental gains, but already, the back line of that team is fantastic now. Trippier, Botman, Pope between the sticks, moving up through the midfield. Probably they need a little bit more there. But then, Wilson, even with the turgid football of Steve Bruce, was fantastic, with a proper team around him, creating much higher quality chances. It's going to go through the roof. So just looking at his last 2 seasons, he's overperformed XG. He's had kind of ridiculous goals per 90. So in his 2020-21 season, he had 0.52 goals per 90, goal basically every other game, top 11%. And then last season, when he was fit, he kept consistent exactly the same 0.52 goals per 90. And he overperformed his XG. It's just mind-boggling that he's been overlooked. The whole point is you have free transfers in this game. If he does get injured, transfer him out. He's a good own till he's not a good own. And why kind of have that doubt clouded? It's kind of a what if situation. What if? And even he might not get injured this season. Could be like Mikel Antonio, where they manage his injuries, but maybe the demands of the game. And then if you see a reduction in his output, you can transfer him out again. Question for you, though, over the Kane pick, 0.5 more, and I figured out you do have 0.5 left over. Son, would you not go for him? He's on the free kicks. He's taken those dead ball situations. Then you can look forward to Son and Dyer linking up instead of just Harry Kane, although Kane is on penalties. But Son, he gets more points per goal. Last season, I think he got more points than Kane, and he looked to be the best player or around to be the best player in the Premier League in 2022.
I've never ever gravitated towards Son, and look, he continues to deliver, maybe defy expectation. But I always look at that price point and think 12 million for a midfielder. And again, I know he's a attacker, but it's almost like the Trent analogy, 7.5 for a defender. That's a lot of money. He's not really a defender. He's an attacking wing back that offers well. So I always default to Harry Kane. Look, I'm only human, Jason. What can I say? But I do like Harry Kane as well. Look, Son, fantastic, consistent performer, and I am a fan. But no, I think just the penalties as well. Just maybe, just edge it for me.
Would it shock you that Son created more chances for Tottenham last season than Harry Kane?
No, because predominantly I always see Harry Kane as a goal scorer first and foremost, and anything else that comes along with that is a bonus. And I see Son as a supplier, although he does get his fair share, a lot of goals. Sharing the golden boot last season.
And then one other question on that is, who do you think had the higher goal conversion rate?
Son, without a shadow of a doubt, I would say.
There was a 14% difference between the two of them. Harry Kane, 12.8% goal conversion rate. Heung-min Son, he's consistently able to do this as well, 26.7%. But none of those stats shake your resolve.
That stuff I've been aware of anyway. And look, I'm happy in the decision that I made by going Kane over Son. And time will tell how that pays off. And that's, this is the fluid team selection as well. So, there are opportunities further down the line. But I'm more than happy to go with Kane as a starter.
I mean, I wouldn't be doing my due diligence as your friend, your partner in crime without asking these questions.
Of course.
And finally, the Haaland one. I mean, what's not to love? Fantastic. He looked really sharp against Liverpool. The interesting thing is I think Liverpool look sharper than Manchester City. They might start the season more explosive, and this could go back to what our discussion with Tal from Zone 7, the amazing ability of that Liverpool team to now manage the levels of fitness fatigue of all those players. So Haaland in a Man City team that wasn't looking as sharp as Liverpool, well, they're only going to get up to that ability really quickly. They're only going to improve. And if Haaland was getting, I can't remember the XG in that game, but it was a fairly high XG in what was not the best performance for Man City, but it wasn't bad either. The sky's the limit there. And also maybe switching up the narrative about going across from leagues. Again, giving it a little plug, but our discussion with James York from StatsBomb, when discussing Haaland, he said one of his pet peeves is actually this whole point of Bundesliga tax. He said from their point at StatsBomb, he said there's not a lot of truth to it. He said statistically, the models, it's hard to prove that summarization. And he said a lot of the kind of key transfers that people point to, the likes of Timo Werner, part of the problem might be the management at Chelsea. The fact that, when was the last time we saw a successful striker transfer to Chelsea, one that actually paid off? So he said maybe that's part of the problem as well in terms of it, and that he doesn't buy into the Bundesliga tax. So that is positive that Haaland's coming over here with ridiculous per 90 numbers. And if he can replicate that, then that is amazing. And I'm a bit scared of not having him in my team. But that is your team, Ben. Very, very differential. Possibly one of the most differential in Fantasy Premier League. I wish you all the best. We'll keep people up to date with it through the season. But for now, I'm going to wish everybody the best of luck. I hope you've enjoyed these videos thus far. Make sure to check out tomorrow. We will be live again so we can answer your questions. And we'll be back again very, very soon.